r/nosleep. Posted by u/nslewis. 11 bodies hanging from 21 trees. The top half of Councilman Jones's body hung by a steel cable looped around his neck and tied off to an old oak tree on one end. It was still dripping blood, bones and veins and torn bits of intestines dangling down where the legs should start. The cable was stretched through the air, over to an ash tree 10 yards away where the other half of the body was hanging by the legs. I have seen some gruesome shit before, but that right there took the cake. Davis, my partner, came out of the Jones house, still looking pale from when he got sick before. "What'd she say?" I asked. Said they were inside eating dinner, and they started hearing this phone ringing. Coming from outside. Thought they had a guest, someone walking up to the door, getting a call. So they waited for a knock, but it didn't come. Just more ringing. So Johnny goes and peeks out the door, but nobody's there, and the ringing doesn't stop. I shone my flashlight around the base of the oak tree and spotted the cell phone, covered in blood. There was a Glock right there next to it. He thought they had an intruder and got his gun, I said. That's right, LT, that's just what happened. Got his gun, and shouted out the door. The ringing just kept going on and on. Betty said she was scared shitless and begged him not to go out, but he charged right out anyway. She watched him from the window. Davis turned and pointed. That one right there. Saw him look around, and then he bent down and picked that phone up off the ground. He looked around again then answered it. I looked at Davis. He didn't look good. Go on, I said. Well, that's when it happened. He just sort of tore apart and then was up in those trees. Davis looked up at the top half of the body again. He really shouldn't have done that. I waited for him to finish being sick. That doesn't make sense, I said. That's all she saw? She didn't see anybody else? Nope, said Davis, wiping off his chin. I searched the area with my flashlight, shining it over the blood-stained grass, and then up the ash tree. There was something sticking out of the side of the tree, with a length of slackened cable hanging down out of it. What the hell is that? I asked. Davis squinted and opened his mouth to respond. That's when the call came over the radio about the second body. It was the strangest case anybody at the station had ever heard of, let alone seen firsthand. 10 bodies in 20 trees, all of the murders occurring within an hour of each other. Each one happened the same way. The phone call, the victim answering it, then the body being torn apart and hung up between 2 trees an instant later. The only thing we had were the cell phones, and the 10 strange devices that had been sticking out of the trees. The cell phones were all burners, as was the number that had called them all, and were dead ends. The device, as it turned out after consulting several experts, appeared to be a hydraulic tensioner of some clever, and unpatented, design. As best we could determine, the tensioner had been somehow used to pull the steel cable very taut very quickly, though nobody could figure out how to activate it. I suggested that the tensioner might have been activated remotely. Initially, my official theory had been that the phone call was merely a tactic to lure the victim outside. When I asked the experts if it was possible that the phone had somehow triggered the device, they agreed it was possible. Judging by the blood and bits of tissue embedded in the wires of the cable at a certain location, it was determined that the cable itself had been somehow used to sever the victim's body. All of the murdered men were prominent members of the community, in good standing. Businessmen, politicians. A pastor. We still didn't have any suspects, after running all the forensics, and thoroughly interviewing everybody who even remotely knew the victims, which ended up being most of the town. For a long time, the interviews had led nowhere. But as I dug deeper, asking more probing questions, a suspicion started growing in me. My witnesses weren't telling me the full story. I had no doubt that they were telling the full truth about what they saw on the night of the murders, but they were holding something back. It was when I was trying to draw a connection between the victims. Sure, the spouses would say, again and again, they all knew each other. Everybody in this town knows everybody else. Some of them played poker together once a month, some of them played golf together occasionally, etc., but there was no overarching connection they could think of, and certainly nothing that would make somebody want to kill them. But there was an overarching connection, I knew for a fact. And the more I talked to the first-hand witnesses, as well as many of the people around town, it became clear to me that everyone else knew what it was too. I think I gotta get out of this place, I said over the phone to my brother. He had been in the middle of preparing a lecture for his advanced engineering class at a prominent university, and I felt bad for interrupting him, but I needed somebody to talk to. I've been telling you that for years, said my brother. I thought this would end it, I said. I dug into the cardboard box that I'd found in the basement of the church where they held their meetings. My brother sighed. You know better than that. You know the problem's deeper than 10 men. That's just the tumor bubbling up out of the skin. You can cut that away, but the cancer's still there. I pulled a white hood out of the box, held it up in disgust, and threw it into the fireplace. Yeah, I guess I always knew that. Still felt good, though. Yes, said my brother. For Granddaddy. For Granddaddy, I said. I hadn't even been born when they lynched him, but it was an injustice that burned in my heart every day of my life since I had found out about it. So you're going to move? You don't think that would look suspicious? I laughed. Brother, after your magic show, these yokels will be scratching their heads for 1,000 years and still not have the first clue about how it happened or who did it. You know, maybe if I'd gotten more of Mom's skin tone instead of Dad's, I'd be more worried. Just promise you'll be careful. Sure, I said. And I was careful. I was as careful as I was when I practiced on those mannequins for 5 patient years. As careful as I was when I drove 3 states over to purchase them. As careful as I was when I measured out the length of steel to the exact millimeter that my brother had specified. The loops made in the exact locations, the tensioning device set to the exact PSI. The phone set in the exact center of the center loop. I had begun to think that it wasn't possible, until that day I finally got it right. I tied one end of the cable to one tree, and brought down the slack. One small loop for the legs, another one to catch the neck, and the big one in the middle, tucked through the slip knot. Then I fed the other end of the slack cable through the hole I'd drilled in the other tree, and finally through the hole in the tensioner. I called one burner from another, and then answered it, well out of the path of the cable. I heard the soft click of the tensioner, now activated by the tone coming from the phone. And then, whoosh. It happened too fast to see, but I knew what was happening. First, the loop on the left pulled back around the legs, beginning to lift the mannequin into the air. The big loop slid through the slip knot and tightened as the body fell into it. The loop closed around the body with such force that the sharp wires sliced it neatly in two. Then the other small loop caught the neck of the now separated top half of the body. After the wire pulled fully taut, one half of the mannequin hung suspended in air near one tree, and the other half hung near the other. That first success had come after 3 years of failure. I spent the next 2 years perfecting the process, until I was able to get it right 10 times out of 10, adjusting each time for different distances between the trees and for different size bodies. I was careful, all right. I was carrying the last of the boxes from my desk to my car when Davis caught up to me in the parking lot. He was out of breath. "LT," he said, gasping. "I guess this is it. Can't convince you to stay?" "Nope," I said. "New job starts Monday. Gotta hit the road." "Oh. Well, I just want you to know, it's been an honor serving under you. I've learned so much." I smiled. "You're a good detective, Davis. Someday, you'll run this place." "I hope I do," said Davis, laughing. "I'll straighten this town right out." "Oh?" I said. "Yeah. This place is a little behind the times if you know what I mean." And then Davis called me by my mother's maiden name. I set the box on the hood of my car, my heart pounding. "You know. Did a little digging," said Davis. "You were careful. Amazingly, mind-blowingly careful, but not quite careful enough." "Do you have any evidence?" I asked, sweat chilling my forehead in the cool winter air. "Plenty," said Davis. "Enough to kindle a good fire, anyway." He winked at me. "You're not going to tell anyone?" "Nah," said Davis. "Can't say I approve, but can't say those guys weren't evil assholes either. I just gotta know, though. How the hell did you do it, exactly?" "A lot of practice," I said. "All those mannequins, huh?" "That's right," I said, stuffing that last box into the trunk. "Well, stay in touch now. I ever catch a tough one, I might give you a call, huh?" "You don't need me," I said. "But yeah, we'll keep in touch, Davis. Thank you. Don't mention it." We shook hands and then I got in my car and drove off. Posted by nosleep. When I was a kid, my father disappeared. 25 years later, I found him. When I was 10 years old, I woke up one morning and my father was gone. I was convinced that something terrible had happened to him, and so was my mother. We drove down to the police station and reported him missing. The officer asked us a lot of questions, and then took Mom into the hall so they could speak alone. I heard their muffled voices, but couldn't make out the words, until Mom said, in a very loud and insistent voice, "No. Michael wouldn't do that." A week later, we found that Dad really would do that. The letter was addressed to me. "My dear sweet Cadence. I am so sorry to do this to you. It's hard for you to understand now, and I hope you never do. I hope you stay sweet forever, and life never grows sour for you. I know I have made it difficult, but I want you and your mother to forget me and move on and be happy. It is going to be very hard for your mom, and I want you to be strong for her, okay? Give her this check. I will send more money, you two never have to worry about that. I love you so much, and I always will, but you have to move on without me. Daddy. Life did grow sour for me, bitterly and quickly. Besides dealing with the pain of my father abandoning me, I had to watch my mother spiral into depression and alcoholism, and there was nothing that I could do about it. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought there was something wrong with me. I wasn't good enough. I made Dad leave and I made Mom sad. I would lie awake at night crying, and wonder what the point of anything was. It was during one of these horrible nights that I looked out the window, and saw a woman in our yard, staring down a body she held cradled in her arms. I blinked and she was gone, but I know that I saw her. The bare parts of her body, her face, her arms, her legs, were so white that they glowed in the moonlight. I saw that she held a body in her arms, a full-grown human body, but it was too dark to make out any features. I screamed out, and Mom came crashing into the room, obviously hungover already. "What is it, honey?" "I saw a lady outside," I said, pointing to the window. Mom flicked on the light and squinted through bleary eyes. "It was just a dream," she said. "Go back to sleep." She drew the curtains closed. "It wasn't. I saw her. She's gone now, she disappeared. It's the middle of the night. Go to sleep, damn it." Mom flicked off the light and slammed the door behind her. Things with Mom got worse before they got better. I spent a lot of nights with my babysitter, Darcy. We would sit on the couch and watch TV together, and sometimes she would let me watch a horror movie as long as I promised not to tell Mom. I liked those nights the best. The Thing was my favorite, and it fit with the idea that was forming in my undeveloped brain that sometimes people weren't what they looked like. You had to be careful, anybody could turn out to be a monster. "Darcy?" I asked one night. "Does your dad still live with you?" "He does, kiddo. He's out working a lot though." "What does he do?" "He's a private dick," said Darcy, and giggled. "Like, detective. Like Sherlock Holmes?" "Well, not really. Mostly he gets dirt on people. Like if someone's cheating, he'll take pictures of it." "Cheating like on a test?" Darcy laughed again. "No. Like, stepping out. Like what my dad did?" "No, like. Well, I don't know, maybe that's what he did, but it's like when a guy hooks up with a girl that's not his girlfriend or wife, you know?" "Oh. I mean, he does other stuff too. He found that girl that went missing last year. That was a big deal." "Oh," I said, and thought that over. "Could he find my dad?" Darcy looked sad. "I don't think your dad wants to be found, Cadence. I'm so sorry." "It's okay, Darcy. But do you think your dad could find my dad?" "I think so," said Darcy. "He found that girl, when everyone else thought she was dead. He's good. I guess he is a little like Sherlock Holmes, sometimes." "Cool," I said. "Can we watch the movie now?" Darcy laughed. "You sure about this? This one is really scary, lots of blood." "Good," I said. We were halfway through when Mom stumbled in through the front door. "Shit," said Darcy, scrambling for the remote. She was too late. "What the fuck are you watching?" demanded Mom. "Evil Dead," I said. "No you're not." Mom staggered over and slammed the TV off. She growled at Darcy. "Some nerve, showing my kid this shit. She's 10 years old." "I'm so sorry, Miss Harris. It won't happen again." "But Mom," I whined, "I like that movie. I'm not a little kid anymore." "Go to bed," said Mom. I knew there was no point in arguing with her. She was drunk. I just hoped that she would forget about it in the morning, as she did sometimes. I headed to bed, turning around to see Mom fling a couple of 20s at Darcy. Then I lay there in bed for a while, jacked up from the movie and the conversation with Darcy. I decided that someday, I would have her dad find my dad. It was a comforting thought, and eventually I fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night with a feeling that something wasn't right. I got out of bed and opened the curtains, and there again was the lady I had seen before, looking down at the body in her arms. She was there for an instant, and then she was gone. This time I didn't scream. Life went on. When I was 12, my mother got sober and began to rebuild her life. Meanwhile, I started heading down a dark path that ended with me getting hooked on oxys in my teens. Later in life, My friends would tell me that the blame rested on my father, but I'm not so sure. Maybe. I do know that I never stopped missing him, and, eventually, my pain was gradually supplied with mounting rage, at my father, at life, at everything. The drugs numbed it all, while they lasted. I won't go into the sordid details, but suffice it to say that my life was really shitty for a long time. And through it all, including the dreamy haze of drugs and the terrible nights of withdrawal, I would see the lady outside of the window of wherever I was staying. She came with less frequency as time passed, and I was able to convince myself that she was just a dream that I sometimes experienced in a feverish half-sleep state. With a painful and drawn-out intervention from Mom, I finally pulled myself together in my early 20s, and charged ahead with my own life. College, then law school, then husband, then 2 kids and a white picket fence. I ended up in a good place. One night, I was settling into bed after a long day of litigation, sipping a glass of wine and reading through the news on my phone. My husband, Alan, was already asleep, breathing heavily. I heard a scream coming from the boys' room, leapt out of bed, and rushed down the hall. I swung the door open and Max, my 4-year-old, was pointing towards the window. "Mom! Someone's there. A girl." I looked out, but there was nobody there. Was she holding a body? I asked, my heart up in my throat. "Yes," said Max. "Cadence." I turned around and there was Alan standing in the doorframe. "A word," he said. "I'll be right back, honey," I said to Max. "Don't be scared." Alan and I walked back to our bedroom and closed the door. "Jesus Christ, honey, why would you tell him about your nightmare?" "I didn't tell him anything," I said. "She's back." The cameras were Alan's idea. I think it was just to prove that we were imagining things, but that's not how it turned out. The next night, when Max started screaming again, we calmed him down and then checked the footage. The lady was nowhere to be seen, but the body was, apparently floating in mid-air. We zoomed in on the face. It was blurry, and he was improbably old, but I recognized him without a doubt. "That's my father," I said. "What the fuck," said Alan. I called Darcy, my old babysitter, the next day. We had kept in casual contact, through Facebook and the like. After catching up a bit, I asked if her father was still a private dick. Darcy laughed. "He is. He's planning to retire next year." "Why do you ask?" "I want to hire him." Oh, is it? Alan?" Now I laughed. No, Alan's a good boy. It's my father. I want to find him." Darcy was quiet for a beat. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "I met with Don Blake that afternoon." "So? You want me to find your old man?" Darcy says. "That's right," I said, sliding the blurry photograph across his desk. Don picked it up, frowning. "There's more than this, I hope?" "There's a woman," I said. "I see. And what's her name?" "I don't know." "Ah. What can you tell me about her?" "I can describe her. After all of those years, her image was burned into my brain. She always looked the same, she didn't appear to age." "Describe her? As in, you don't have a photograph, right?" "Right. I can describe her. You must have a sketch artist you can contact, Mr. Blake." "Say I do," said Don. "You want me to find your father based on a blurry photo and the description of a nameless woman. And that's it. Gotta level with you here, Cadence, I wouldn't be getting my hopes up. When I was a kid, Darcy would tell me about you. About how you found that missing child, when nobody else could, not the parents, not the police. About how everybody had given up hope, but you kept working away until you found her." Don laughed. "That was a long time ago. Please, Mr. Blake, find my father." A week later, I got the call from Don. "Don't believe it myself, but we found your old man." My heart felt like it was exploding. "Oh? Yeah, guess your mystery lady likes to frequent a bar downtown. My guy tailed her back to a house one night, and parked it. Next day, a curtain opens, and there's your father standing looking out the window." "My God, Mr. Blake, thank you so much. Listen, kid. I'm here looking at the photos, and well, your dad isn't looking so good, you know? I just want you to be prepared for that. And well, I deal with people a lot, you know? I've seen it all. And if you really haven't heard from him for all these years, well, there's a reason for that. A reason you might not want to find out about." "What's the address?" Don gave me the address and I headed right over. A dozen emotions swirled around inside of me, as my mind tried, for the 1000th time that week, to make sense of it. I didn't know what was happening, or what had happened, or what would happen. I just knew that I had to see my father again. I pulled into the driveway around noon, got out of the car, and walked up the path to the door. I rang the doorbell several times, and then grabbed the knocker and started banging away. At last, the door creaked open, and I saw a sliver of darkness inside. The curtains were all drawn, and no lights were on. "Cadence," said a thin voice from behind the door. "You can't be here." "Dad?" I said, tears forming in my eyes. "Dad? You must be very quiet. Can you do that, sweetie? Can you be very quiet?" "Yes," I whispered. The door opened a little further, and I stepped in. "I only pray that the doorbell didn't wake it," said my father. He closed the door, and then I saw his outline in the darkness. "Dad." I got greedy and reckless. I had to see my grandsons before I die. "Dad. What is going on?" I felt the hot tears running down my face. "The truth then. We must be quick, Katie. Just listen and then go, okay? Just listen and go." My eyes were beginning to adjust to the darkness, even through the welling tears. My father looked ancient, far older than his actual age. I nodded. "Listen and go," I whispered. "That night, I didn't see it or hear it, I felt it. I crept into your room, and there it was, leaning over you. I knew that I couldn't fight it. So I offered myself, in exchange for your life. It has been feeding on me ever since, keeping me here, only taking me out. To see you, and now the boys. That arrangement worked for both of us. It delighted, thinking it was torturing me, and I delighted, in seeing you. That's all, Cadence, my dear sweet Cadence. You must go now, or it will all be for nothing." I sensed the danger, and I knew that I couldn't hold back from crying out for much longer, but I had to hug my father one last time. I wrapped my arms around his frail body, and pressed my face against his, our tears running down each other's cheeks. Then I left. I got in my car, drove around the block, and parked. I let it wash over me. The horror, and the love. Posted by nosleep. I really wish this giant creepy bird would just leave me alone. The police aren't taking me seriously, but this thing ate my cat. I don't know how the hell it got in. I came down the stairs early one morning, and there it was in my living room, this monstrosity that stood taller than my 12-year-old son, a horrible sack dangling from its neck, protruding out of an enormous winged body on top of spindly legs. Mitten's fluffy black tail was disappearing down into its massive beak. I turned around and headed right back up the stairs, grabbed my son, and locked us all in my bedroom. You would too if you saw this thing in your living room. I called 911, and after just barely convincing the operator that it wasn't a prank, they sent somebody out. The cop got to my house and had a look around. The giant bird wasn't there. Mitten's mangled body, or what was left of it, was found in the backyard. The cop said, sure, it looked like something had gotten him, but certainly not a 5-foot-tall bird that had somehow gotten in my house, with no signs of forced entry, eaten my cat, and then partially regurgitated him in my backyard. My wife too thinks I'm going crazy. I am, but that's beside the point. This thing is driving me crazy. It was easy to identify the bird, once I later got another look at it in better light. All I had to do was type creepy bird into Google and there it was, the marabou stork. Go ahead and look it up. It's called the Undertaker bird for God's sake. Now imagine how freaked out you'd be if that thing was following you around for a week. I know it doesn't make sense. I'm in Maine, and this beast is supposed to live all the way over in Africa. I don't know how it got here, but it's here. I don't care if anybody else has seen it, it's here. The second time I saw it was in the beer aisle at the supermarket. I turned the corner and there it was, staring, like it was waiting for me. I stood in terrified shock and kept waiting for somebody else to come along and do something, but nobody came. We had the aisle to ourselves. It spread out its massive wings so that they reached both sides of the aisle. Then it let out a truly awful karoo-oak. I started backing up, but it closed its wings, turned, and walked away around the corner. I figured I'd hear somebody start screaming when they ran into the bird, but I didn't hear anything except the usual cacophony of supermarket sounds, carts rolling around, people throwing things into them, talking to each other, as registers beeped and the doors slid open and closed. I walked over to where it had been standing, right in front of my favorite beer. I looked down, hoping to see a feather or some other tangible evidence of its existence, but there was nothing. Somebody turned the corner that the bird had disappeared around. I searched his face for some sign that he had seen a giant, terrifying bird loose in the supermarket. I figured it wouldn't be hard to tell. He looked bored and maybe a little irritated, so I guessed he hadn't seen anything. If it was real, I don't know how anybody could have missed it. I kept my mouth shut. I considered just abandoning my groceries and getting out of there, but at that point, I was starting to doubt my sanity. I figured it best to just pretend, outwardly, that nothing had happened. I put the beer in my cart and pushed it over to the checkout line, turning my head around every half second to make sure there wasn't a bird monster right there behind me. The third time I saw the bird convinced me that it was real. I was taking my morning jog. It's always pretty quiet on my little backwoods road, and especially at that time in the early morning. It wasn't unusual to pass a car or two, but that was about it. On this morning, I heard a car coming up behind me, so I moved over to the shoulder and turned my head so I could give a wave. I saw the bird standing there, on the opposite side of the road, its wings spread wide. I froze, and it started running across the road, right at me, in front of the approaching car. I saw the flash of brake lights and heard the squeal of tires. I know the driver saw that bird. The car fishtailed for a few gut-wrenching moments, before performing a full 360 spin. Then it was careening off the road, and it smashed into a tall pine tree. The bird, which had been standing in the middle of the road with its wings still spread, let out the ungodly croak again, and then slowly turned and walked off into the woods. I called 911 and several minutes later an ambulance was taking away the obviously dead body of the driver. We live in a small town, so the cop who came was the same one who had come to my house before. Officer Giles. He'd gone to high school with my brother. I was taking my morning jog like always, I said, when I heard the car come up behind me. Giles wrote something down on his notepad. And I looked over, and I saw it. That damn bird. The one that was in my house. It's a marabou stork. Giles shot me a look, flipped his notebook closed, then walked out into the middle of the road. He tested the pavement with his foot. Black ice, he said. I started carrying a gun after that. I hadn't fired it for a long time, but I had a pistol at the top of my closet. It was the same one I used to shoot with my dad when I was a kid, and I kept it mostly for sentimental reasons. I've seen the bird one more time since the car crash. It was again on my road, this time at night. I was driving home from dinner with my friends when I saw it there lit up by my headlights. It was crouched by the side of the road, picking away at a deer carcass. I stopped the car in the middle of the road and watched as the bird lifted its ghastly wings, a string of entrails hanging from its razor-sharp beak. I reached into my glove box and grabbed the gun. I am not a brave man, which is exactly why I was determined to end this thing right then and there, one way or the other. I had been miserable all week, unable to sleep, jumping at every sound, afraid to walk around every corner. I had begun cooking up theories to explain the bird. Maybe it was a demon from hell, sent to punish me for something I had done. I stretched my mind to piece it together. What did my cat, the supermarket, and the car crash have in common? Nothing. What had I done that was so bad? I couldn't think of anything. At any rate, if I hadn't been so desperate, I would have never had the courage to do what I did. I rolled down the window as the bird took a step towards my car. I'd never been more terrified in my life. I fired off 5 rounds right into the beast's breast. I saw the bullets hit. The bird shook, and blood spurted from the wounds. It opened its deadly beak, as if screaming in agony, but no sound came forth. I put the car in drive and tore hell up the hill and kept going until I got home. I thought it was over after that. Nothing had followed me home. I didn't see the bird the next day. But now I know, it's not over. I was asleep in bed last night, my first real sleep in a week, when something jolted me awake. I heard it, coming from just outside. Kuruuk. I stayed awake after that, staring up at the ceiling, gun in hand. I don't think this is going to end well for me. Nobody will help me. My wife has suggested a temporary stay in the psychiatric ward, so I've stopped talking about it. But if something happens to me, you'll know the truth.